At 6:30 a.m., a 14-year-old girl called 911 after finding her mother unconscious on the patio outside their home in Farmington Hills, Michigan. 35-year-old Nata Huranaya was lying on her back directly beneath an open second-floor window. Her 16-year-old son, Mohammed, was performing CPR while the 911 operator tried to keep the children on the line. At first, it looked like a tragic accident. Supposedly, Nata had been cleaning the window in the guest room, lost her balance, and fell outside. A ladder, a bucket, and window cleaner were standing next to the window, but something didn't add up. There was almost no blood at the scene. The ladder hadn't even moved, and Nata's body was lying in a position that did not match a fall from that height. She also preliminarily appeared to show signs of sexual assault. Then, investigators checked the surveillance cameras around the house, and they saw something completely different. The footage showed the shadow of two people inside the room. A few seconds later, one figure pulled Nata through the window into the house, and 28 minutes later, she was pushed out of the window onto the ground. The medical examiner later confirmed that the woman had been dead before the fall. She had been tortured and strangled. But the worst was yet to come, because the surveillance cameras also showed who had been inside the house that night. The only people with Nata were her 3 children, and the most suspicious of them was her eldest son, who had carefully cleaned the room from which his mother had been thrown before the police arrived. Hey guys, let me grab you for just a second. I'm really curious where my audience is watching from, so I'd love for you to drop a comment and tell me what city you're in and what time it is for you right now. Thanks for taking a moment. Go ahead and share that in the comments, and now let's keep going. In August of 2017, police in Farmington Hills, Michigan, responded to a call in one of the city's wealthy neighborhoods. Officers were told that a mother of 3 had died in what appeared to be a terrible accident, but when they arrived at the scene, it didn't look like an accident at all. As investigators started searching the house and asking questions, a much darker picture began to emerge. A setup that suggested the crime had not only been staged, but may have actually been caught on camera. It was just after 6:30 on an August morning in 2017 when Officer Jordan from the Farmington Hills Police Department was dispatched to a large home in an upscale suburb outside Detroit. He was responding to an emergency call made by a 14-year-old girl named Auntawi. That morning, the teenager had been searching through the house looking for her mother, Nata Huranaya. Eventually, Nata was found outside. She was lying on the patio along the side of the house, stretched out on the ground and completely unresponsive. It appeared that she had fallen from an open second-floor window above her.
We need an ambulance.
What's going on there?
I don't know. We were late for school, so I went to find my mom. And I looked out the window because it was open and it's never open. And she fell.
Your mom fell?
Like 2 stories, yeah.
She fell 2 stories? How old is your mom?
33, I think, and she fell on concrete.
Okay, and you said, all right, is she breathing?
Is she breathing? Her neck was better on her neck, I don't know.
Is she breathing?
I'm gonna check if she's breathing.
Okay, and you said she fell over 2 stories?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, this was an accidental fall?
I'm pretty sure.
In the middle of the call, Ya handed the phone to her older brother, 16-year-old Mohammed. He immediately started performing CPR on his mother as she lay motionless on the patio.
9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You have to take up the pace.
Okay, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3.
So what happened to your mom there?
Looks like she fell off the building.
How did she fall?
I didn't go into the room. I just was scared. I screamed. I couldn't look.
Okay, do you know how she fell or what she was doing?
Yeah, she was on the top floor. She was washing or cleaning the windows.
She was cleaning the windows?
Yeah.
Officer Jordan was called over to the side of the house, and Ya led him to the patio area. When he arrived, he saw Mohammed trying to perform CPR on his mother. The officer quickly took over. Sadly, once paramedics arrived, they confirmed that the woman had no pulse. The Oakland County Medical Examiner's Office took custody of Nata's body. She was pronounced dead at the scene under circumstances that were still unclear. The two teenagers, Ya and Mohammed, explained that their younger sister, who was only 12 years old, was still asleep in her bedroom. They said they were the only people inside the house, and as far as they knew, nobody else had entered the home during the night or that morning before police arrived. Ya told officers that she was supposed to leave for school at 6:30 that morning because her mother drove her every day. But when it was time to go, she couldn't find her anywhere in the house, and her mother wasn't answering calls to her cell phone.
When's the last time you guys saw your mom?
Last night.
What time?
Like maybe 7 or 8. She went to sleep early.
Okay. And when did you guys find her?
This morning, I called her twice at 6 on both her phones. She didn't answer, so I called her again at 6:30 because we're supposed to be at school by 6:40.
Eventually, Ya checked the guest bedroom and the upstairs bathroom, which the family referred to as the makeup room. It was the place where Nata usually got ready in the mornings. Inside the room, near an open window, there was a ladder, a bucket of water, and a container of Tilex cleaner. But her mother was nowhere to be found.
And there was like cleaning stuff, and she normally cleans like from the house in the morning because she wakes up early.
Okay.
So I wanted to look out the window, and I thought that like just in case maybe I doubt it's possible, but she was out there, and then I called my brother and we went outside.
Okay. So this was around 6:30 this morning, you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like 6:35.
Okay.
The children's father, Basil Altawi, was living separately from the family. Their parents' divorce had not yet been finalized, even though the couple had already been living apart for more than a year.
Why don't you call your dad, okay? See if he can come over here, all right? Just to hang out with you guys while we continue figuring out what's going on with your mom, okay? All right?
I have a different story than her. I did see her this morning.
What
I
time?
took a shower around 6 o'clock and I heard her moving in her room maybe 5:50 before I took a shower.
You just heard her in her room?
Yeah, that's what.
Where's her room?
Downstairs. She has all her makeup upstairs as well.
When Basil arrived at the house, sergeants from the Farmington Hills Police Department officially informed him that his wife was dead. Basil collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed with shock and grief. But the scene surrounding Nata's supposed accidental death immediately raised serious suspicions for investigators. According to Ya, neither she nor her brother had moved their mother's body after finding her on the patio. Yet when paramedics arrived, Nata was lying flat on her back, which was considered a very unusual position for someone who had supposedly fallen accidentally from a second-story window. Officer Jordan was also troubled by the almost complete lack of blood at the scene, another major sign that the fatal injuries may not have come from the fall itself. Investigators also found the condition of the guest room suspicious. The bucket, sitting beneath the open window, had not been disturbed. The ladder that Nata was supposedly standing on before the fall had not shifted either. Even the bottle of cleaning solution sitting on the top step remained perfectly in place. A bandage had been taped along the lower edge of the window, and it appeared to have torn away at the exact moment of the fall. On the outside of the closed window to the left, investigators noticed streaks of dried, opaque spray. They concluded that Tilex cleaner had been sprayed onto the glass, leaving visible drips running downward. Of course, Tilex is not meant for cleaning windows. Near Nata's body, on the patio, investigators found a patterned towel. It carried a strong chemical smell, similar to cleaning solution or possibly something much more powerful. The towel was collected as evidence for forensic testing. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. However, detectives noticed that security cameras had been installed around the property. Basil told investigators that, as far as he knew, the DVR system was not even working and that he had no idea how to access it. Even so, he gave detectives permission to review the footage. It turned out the cameras were fully operational, and one of them was pointed directly toward the side patio. The guest room window itself was not visible in the camera frame, but investigators could clearly see shadows being cast against the opposite wall. At first, Officers recorded the screen using a handheld camera so they could immediately preserve what they were seeing. Later, a higher quality copy of the footage was downloaded and carefully analysed. At 5:53 that morning, the light inside Nata's makeup room, the upstairs guest bathroom, suddenly turned on. The footage showed the shadow of someone opening the window. It quickly became obvious that there were two people inside the room. Moments later, one figure could be seen dragging Nata toward the window. The person appeared to lift her from the floor and pull her onto the windowsill. Then Nata was pushed out of the window. For a brief moment, the shadow of the person remained above her, as if looking down, before moving back through the room. The light switched off briefly and then came back on again. Investigators believed this was likely the moment when the ladder was moved into position beneath the window. The killer had staged the entire scene. When the medical examiner completed the autopsy, the results confirmed exactly what investigators had already suspected from the surveillance footage. Nata's cause of death was ruled to be asphyxia caused by strangulation. She was already dead before she was pushed from the window. Even more disturbing, investigators concluded that she had likely been killed hours earlier, long before her body was thrown outside and later discovered by her children. 35-year-old Nata Huranaya lived for her children. Friends described the personal trainer as compassionate, energetic, and deeply determined to give her kids a better life. She was also known for being extremely active. Neighbors often saw her out jogging in the mornings. According to people who knew her, Nata almost always seemed happy. No matter what was happening in her life, she usually had a smile on her face. But in reality, she did not have many reasons to smile. Serious problems had been building in her personal life for a long time. Nata died just 2 days before a scheduled court hearing in her divorce case. Her marriage to Basil Altawi had lasted nearly 20 years. The couple had married in Syria back in 1999. Nata filed for divorce after a Valentine's Day incident in 2016 when her husband allegedly pushed her down a flight of stairs. Basil denied that accusation, but he still pleaded guilty to domestic violence. He was ordered to wear an electronic ankle monitor and was given strict conditions, including a complete no-contact order with his wife for 2 years and supervised visitation only with the children. At the same time, his professional life was also collapsing. That same year, he faced multiple charges involving Medicaid and healthcare insurance fraud connected to his work as an internal medicine doctor in Canton. In January of 2017, he was sentenced to 1 day in jail and ordered to pay nearly $280,000 in fines. According to documents from the divorce case, the doctor, who had once earned more than $350,000 a year, could no longer practice medicine and claimed he was unable to continue paying court-ordered financial support to his family. He argued that he could no longer afford to maintain the family's, in his words, luxurious lifestyle in Farmington Hills. Basil also complained that Nata constantly went shopping and built up thousands of dollars in credit card debt at expensive clothing stores. He also expressed concerns that his wife was Americanizing their children and pulling them away from their Syrian and Islamic roots. So, naturally, after Nata's murder, investigators looked very closely at Basil. But none of the security cameras around the property captured anyone entering or leaving the home during the night. The only people inside the house were Nata and her 3 children, and because of the court order against Basil, he was forbidden from visiting the Farmington Hills home. His movements were monitored through the electronic ankle bracelet. The tracking data confirmed that he did violate the restriction and came to the house, but only after Nata had already been found dead and police insisted that he come support the children. At the time of the murder itself, Basil was nowhere near the home. Less than an hour after Nata was pushed from the window, Ya and Mohammed discovered her body and called 911. Surveillance footage captured Ya handing the phone to her older brother so he could begin CPR. She could be seen running back and forth between the scene and the end of the driveway, desperately trying to guide emergency responders to the side of the house where her mother was lying. The camera also captured Mohammed during the moments when he was supposedly trying to save his mother's life, or more accurately, appearing to perform CPR, or doing it extremely poorly. The 16-year-old barely applied any pressure during the chest compressions. Investigators later synchronized the surveillance footage, showing Mohammed beside his mother on the patio with the audio from the 911 call. They discovered that at least twice during the call, the teenager noticeably stopped attempting CPR altogether. But one thing he never stopped doing was counting the compressions out loud. On the audio recording, it sounded as if he was desperately fighting to save his mother's life, while in reality, he was simply sitting next to her. When Ya and Officer Jordan approached him, the footage showed Mohammed suddenly beginning to press harder. However, Officer Jordan later recalled that when he first saw the teenager, it looked as though Mohammed was holding a cell phone in his right hand, while lightly tapping his mother's body with his left.
3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1.
You're doing really good. Keep going.
4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1.
On the 21st, the same day Nata was found, investigators had already conducted an initial walkthrough of the home. Later, Farmington Hills Police returned with a search warrant and carried out a much more detailed examination. That morning, detectives noticed several suspicious items inside a front-loading washing machine that was displaying an error code. Through the glass door, they could see a beige bathroom rug inside. In the dryer, they found a pair of Mohammed's blue jeans, along with the t-shirt. It was not a full load of laundry. Small white particles were also left behind in the water, possibly fragments from the backing of that same bath mat. The rug, along with the chemically scented towel found near Nata's body, and several other towels collected from different areas of the house, were all sent out for forensic testing. Investigators suspected that one of those items may have been used during the murder, possibly soaked with some kind of toxic substance that first incapacitated Nata. And there was certainly no shortage of dangerous chemicals inside the home. Detectives found especially large amounts stored in the garage, including containers of weed killer, insecticides, and rodent poison. During the search, police also collected bottles of antifreeze, bleach, and various types of paint. Everything was sent to the lab for analysis. After reviewing the surveillance footage, detectives returned to the house and asked every member of the family to come to the police station for formal interviews. Basil refused. However, he did leave detectives inside the home while he went to pick up Ya from the school library. He also allowed investigators to speak privately with Mohammed inside the house.
So what time does she normally go to bed?
Normally I'd say around 10, maybe, late 9:30.
9:30 or 10? Do you recall what time she went to bed last night?
Around late 7, maybe early 8, I think.
You know why she would go to bed 3 hours earlier, or?
No. Like I said, we didn't really talk much yesterday, so.
But yes, you mean Sunday night?
Sunday
Night going into Monday. Okay.
How are you? Do you and your mom get along well?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty normal. We've been pretty normal for like a while. Like the only time I told you this morning, we kind of had issues, you could say, is at the beginning of like the divorce case, but that's about it.
How long has that been going on?
Nearly 2 years, a year and a half.
Mohammed initially told the responding officer that he woke up around 6:30 that morning. But later, during questioning with detectives, he said he had actually been awake since 6 o'clock. He claimed that from the moment he went to bed that night until Ya called for him the next morning, he had stayed inside his bedroom the entire time.
You get up at all during the night? You walking around anywhere? Nothing. So you go to sleep at 11:30, you don't hear anything, don't see anything, don't come out of your room. Get up at 6:30, 6-ish.
Yeah.
And you go into the bathroom, you take a shower.
Yeah.
You're getting ready for school.
Yeah.
Okay, and then your sister, how should she knock on the door? She call you? What happened?
I heard her scream in the makeup room, and then I ran to her and she ran to me and she's like, I'm on the phone, you have to do this, and then I'm like, okay, I'm outside.
Okay.
Detectives told Mohammed that the security cameras around the house had actually been working, something the teenager seemed completely unaware of. They also informed him that the footage had captured something, or rather someone, near the window with his mother. Several times during the interview, detectives suggested that what happened still could have been an accident. Maybe Mohammed had simply been helping his mother clean the window when she slipped and fell. Maybe he had been holding the ladder but got distracted for just a second, and that one moment turned tragic. If that was really what happened, investigators told him, then nobody would be blaming him.
Now, we noticed that, there's a security system here. Do you know how that works?
No, I wasn't even aware that we had more cameras in the back of the house.
We want to get a resolution to this. I know you do too.
Yeah.
The actions happen all the time. Somebody could be helping somebody with something, holding a ladder or something like that, and something happens. That's why we need to know what happened. And that's why we're looking to you, because you're the oldest and we've watched the video. And we're trying to see what your input into this is as far as how your mother ended up falling out the window.
I mean, is there any specific question you can ask me? Where should I go from?
I want you to start at the beginning. Tell me what happened.
Okay, so I woke up 6 o'clock, and then, my sister's awake already, she's also getting ready. And then I assumed my other sister was getting ready, so.
Did your sister see what happened?
Yeah, she's the one who found out, you could say.
I'm sorry?
She's the one who found out, the whole scene or whatever.
Was she there when it happened? Or were you there when it happened?
I don't know if I don't want to say anything about my sister, but I just know that she was awake before me.
Somebody was there. Yeah. We know that. It's on video.
I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to say anything about my sister, but I mean, if it comes down to it, then yeah, she was awake before me.
Detectives told Mohammed that the figure seen in the footage appeared to have short hair. It was a male, and that meant it had to be him. After that, the teenager gave two different versions of what happened. In the first story, he claimed that he had seen his mother that morning and brought her a spray bottle for cleaning the window. Then he said he left the room, and sometime after that, she fell. In the second version, he changed his story again. This time, he claimed he had been holding the ladder when his mother slipped, and that he watched her go over the edge, but insisted that he never pushed her.
We just need to know.
It's my mom's life, man.
Mohammed, I understand that. I understand that wholeheartedly. We just need to know why, so we don't look into this further, okay? What happened? Mohammed, it's all right.
Okay, so when I woke up, like I told you, she was going upstairs to clean the window and stuff like that. I didn't really overlook it. I was going downstairs to drink water first, so I thought she was going to do her makeup, and then I went back upstairs, and then she was cleaning the window, and then she's like, bring me something to clean the window with. So I brought her the spray bottle, and then she already had a ladder in there, or the stool or whatever it's called. She was taking the window, the thing off, screen off, and then before I left the room, she was getting up on the window. She told me to just be there so I could help her with the ladder, hold on it, because it was shaking a little bit. So I came over. She tried to. I don't want.
Just tell us. You've gone this far, bud.
She went on the ladder. She sprayed it already, and then she tried to lean over. I was standing there, holding the ladder, and just looking around. Not really. I mean, I'm holding it. I don't think I'm supposed to look at it the whole time. And then she leans over and she trips, and then something got stuck on. I don't know what it was. So I went over like that, and then that's when she fell. And I didn't know what to do. So I just went to take a shower because I thought I was dreaming or whatever. I wanted something else to happen.
About 40 minutes later, Basil returned to the house and quickly shut down the interview. Not long after that, the doctor hired an attorney for his son. When investigators obtained Mohammed's phone records, they discovered that on the day of the murder, he had made 50 calls to the same phone number, starting at 4:27 that morning, and continuing throughout the rest of the day. In his contacts, the number was saved under the name Love. 8 of those calls were made before 5 o'clock in the morning. Detectives reviewed months of previous phone records and found no other day with anything close to that level of activity. Many of the calls lasted only a few seconds, and some were never answered at all, including one incoming call from an unknown number to Mohammed's phone at 5:55 in the morning, the exact same time surveillance cameras captured Nata falling from the window. When investigators later obtained a search warrant and unlocked Mohammed's iPhone, they discovered who the Love contact really was. It was his father, Bassel Altawi. Inside the phone, detectives found months of conversations between Bassel and his son, including photos, videos, and audio recordings that Mohammed had secretly sent him. Some of those recordings captured conversations involving his mother, unlike his father, whose contact name was saved as Love. Nata's contact in Mohammed's phone was saved under the name Dog. The teenager had also been secretly recording conversations between Nata and her divorce attorney, then forwarding those recordings directly to his father. One screenshot taken about a month before Nata's death showed a text exchange between her and Mohammed. In the message, Nata claimed she had information about criminal activity involving Bassel that could potentially send him to prison. She also wrote that the only reason she had stayed silent was because she feared how that information could be used. Mohammed immediately forwarded the screenshot to Bassel. Investigators never publicly revealed what kind of damaging information Nata may have been referring to, but Mohammed's response made it clear that he viewed his mother's words as a threat against his father. One particular photo sent by Mohammed to Bassel 3 weeks before the murder stood out to investigators. The image showed the second-floor guest room window. Detectives also uncovered a disturbing internet search with no confirmed date attached to it. How to remove a window screen. Investigators also uncovered another search made at 8:10 on the morning of Nata's death. While emergency crews were still working at the scene and the house remained surrounded by police and investigators, Mohammed was searching Google for information on how to erase data from a computer. To detectives, that detail immediately stood out as deeply disturbing. At the very moment paramedics and officers were still trying to determine how Nata died, the teenager appeared to already be looking into ways to destroy digital evidence. That search later became one of the details prosecutors considered especially suspicious. Not long afterward, the 16-year-old was arrested and formally charged with the murder of his own mother. News of the arrest spread quickly through the local community and shocked people who knew the family. For many, it was hard to comprehend that a teenager had become the central figure in such a brutal and complicated case. Police revealed very little about the possible role of his father. Investigators limited themselves to brief statements, saying only that there was not enough evidence to charge the older Altawi. Even so, questions surrounding Bassel's possible involvement became one of the most heavily discussed aspects of the case. At that point, the case against Mohammed appeared extremely strong. The combination of phone records, messages, internet searches, and other digital evidence created what prosecutors believed was a convincing picture of what happened inside the home that night. Because of that, many people felt investigators had very little doubt about their theory of the crime. People close to the family later explained that Mohammed, unlike his sisters, was much more similar to his father and shared many of his traditional Muslim beliefs. According to those who knew them, arguments between Mohammed and his mother had become increasingly common because they viewed life, freedom, and the role of women in very different ways. While his sisters enjoyed spending time with their mother, going shopping with her, and generally embracing American culture, people close to the family said Mohammed saw things very differently. He disapproved of his mother's lifestyle and the growing independence she had gained after becoming a personal trainer. Witnesses also claimed that Mohammed took his mother's decision to leave his father especially hard. To him, it was not just the breakdown of the family, but also a rejection of the traditional values he strongly believed in. The atmosphere inside the home gradually turned tense and hostile. After one argument about a week before his mother's death, Ya later told police that Mohammed screamed at Nata, "It doesn't matter," because she's going to get what's coming to her anyway. Several years later, after lengthy appeals, procedural disputes, and delays caused by the pandemic, the case finally went to trial. Public attention immediately exploded again. What once seemed like a complicated family tragedy had now turned into one of the most high-profile murder trials in the region. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors carefully reconstructed the final hours of Nata's life and presented their own theory of how they believed the killing happened. Prosecutors argued that Mohammed strangled his mother using a cloth soaked with a toxic substance inside her makeup room. According to their theory, that explained the strange circumstances surrounding her death and the lack of obvious signs of a violent struggle. Even after years of investigation, however, authorities were never able to determine exactly what chemical substance may have been used or where the teenager could have obtained it. That uncertainty became one of the defense's strongest arguments throughout the trial. Prosecutors claimed this theory also explained why the athletic and physically active 35-year-old woman had no defensive wounds. Investigators pointed out that there were no injuries on Nata's body typically associated with someone fighting for their life. At the same time, the alleged killer also showed no injuries or marks suggesting a physical struggle had taken place between him and the victim. For prosecutors, that became an important part of the overall picture they were trying to present to the jury. At the same time, the room where the attack supposedly happened showed no obvious signs of violence or murder. There were no overturned objects, no significant blood evidence, and none of the physical chaos investigators would normally expect to find after a violent confrontation. Because of that, the case continued to spark major debate even years after Nata's death. Prosecutors based their claim that the attack occurred inside the guest bathroom largely on the surveillance footage. Investigators stated that the cameras captured the lights turning on in that room just minutes before Nata's body was dragged toward the window. Those recordings became one of the central pieces of evidence presented by the prosecution. But defense attorneys strongly criticized both the police investigation and the way the case had been handled from the beginning. They argued that detectives focused on Mohammed far too quickly, while effectively ignoring other men who could have potentially been involved in Nata's murder. According to the defense, investigators locked onto one theory almost immediately and failed to seriously explore alternative explanations. Defense attorneys also brought up one of the fitness instructors Nata had previously dated. According to them, the man had already demonstrated that he could enter the house without the children even noticing he was there. The defense argued that if someone familiar with Nata could secretly get inside the home, then the real killer could have done the same thing. That possibility became one of the key alternative theories presented during the trial. Another major issue for prosecutors was Mohammed's constantly changing stories. His statements repeatedly contradicted each other, and important details shifted throughout the investigation. That only fueled more debates about how reliable his statements really were and under what circumstances they had been obtained. One of the biggest points of attention during the trial centered around the recorded interrogation in which Mohammed admitted that he had been inside the room with his mother. It later became clear that investigators had questioned him before reading him his rights. Legally, that process should only have taken place after he was informed of his right to remain silent, given access to legal counsel, and allowed to have an attorney present during questioning. Mohammed's defense team argued that the teenager was essentially repeating a version of events suggested to him by detectives themselves. They claimed he only agreed that he had been in the room with his mother because investigators repeatedly told him that was what the surveillance footage showed. The defense insisted the interrogation had been conducted improperly, and that the statements obtained during it should not be considered reliable evidence. Eventually, the Michigan Court of Appeals ruled that most of Mohammed's statements could not be used as evidence at trial. The decision dealt a serious blow to the prosecution, and triggered another wave of debate surrounding the case. Even so, after just over a week of testimony, it took the Oakland County jury only 2 hours to reach a verdict. The decision came quickly and without hesitation: guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. In that moment, the tension that had surrounded the case for years finally reached its peak. By the time of sentencing, Mohammed was already 20 years old. By then, the case had completely changed the lives of everyone involved and drawn widespread attention from people who had followed the story for years. During the sentencing hearing, the convicted killer chose to represent himself. He spoke for hours in what many later described as a rambling and chaotic rant. Throughout his speech, Mohammed repeatedly insisted that he was innocent despite the jury's verdict and the court's ruling against him. His words only added to the tense and emotionally exhausting atmosphere that had surrounded the case from the very beginning.
5 years ago, I got arrested for, as I said, the worst crime imaginable. MDOC's requested sentence for 40 to 80 years. I don't care. Oh man, and for her to die at 35 years old, a terrible death by any means, I wish I could change. Oh man.
His mother wasn't taken away, she wasn't killed. He murdered her. He murdered her.
When Bassel Altawi stood up to deliver his victim impact statement, the atmosphere inside the courtroom instantly became even more tense. People expected to hear him speak about his late wife, the pain of losing her, and the devastating impact the tragedy had on the family. But within the first few moments of his statement, it became clear that his speech was heading in a completely different direction. Judge Martha Anderson visibly began losing patience as Bassel's remarks slowly shifted away from grief and turned into an attempt to defend his son. Instead of focusing on his wife and the fact that his children had lost their mother, the disgraced doctor openly spoke in support of Mohammed, describing him as another victim of the tragedy. His comments immediately created tension throughout the courtroom. For many people in attendance, the remarks were shocking, especially given the circumstances of the case and the emotional weight of the hearing. It seemed as though the focus was once again being pulled away from the murdered woman and the consequences of the crime, and redirected toward defending the person who had already been found guilty. That moment ultimately became one of the most controversial and emotionally difficult scenes of the entire trial.
He's been convicted, wrongfully convicted, also that impacted me and his sister.
That's not what the victim impact statement is about.
He was a loving, and he's still a loving, caring, supportive human being.
I want you to be quiet. You are not the victim.
He, I said he, not I.
But if he's talking about you, sir, he's referring to you as a victim. You are not the victim here.
After Bassel finished speaking in court, the emotional tension inside the room reached a breaking point. His daughter, Ya, had to be physically escorted out of the courtroom because she could no longer control her emotions. The atmosphere became chaotic and incredibly heavy as everyone watched the family conflict that had been building for years finally explode in public during the hearing. Ya screamed at her father in anger, openly expressing her pain, frustration, and rage. Ya continued speaking out publicly, defending herself against the accusations and claims made by her brother.
I didn't kill her.
In the end, after a long and emotionally exhausting trial and a full review of the evidence, the court handed down its final sentence: between 35 and 60 years in prison. The ruling marked the end of one of the most high-profile and emotionally charged chapters of the case, which had been closely followed both by the family and by people shocked by the disturbing details of the crime. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was tense and heavy. For some, the sentence brought a sense of relief after years of pain and exhausting court proceedings. For others, it served as another painful reminder of a tragedy that had permanently changed so many lives. The court's decision became the final chapter in a long legal battle that, from beginning to end, had been surrounded by intense emotions, dramatic statements, and constant public attention.
So it is the sentence of this court with respect to the one count of homicide, murder in the first degree, premeditated, that you be sentenced to 35 years to 60 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. You have 1,858 days.
After the trial finally came to an end, Ya spoke with reporters and admitted that, for a while, she had tried to feel sympathy for her brother despite everything that had happened. She said those years had been incredibly difficult and emotionally draining for the entire family. According to Ya, the last 5 years had become a constant cycle of pain, tension, and endless attempts to come to terms with a tragedy that completely changed their lives. At the same time, Ya made it clear that throughout all those years, Muhammad never showed what she believed were any genuine signs of remorse. According to her, that became one of the most painful aspects of the entire situation for the family. She explained that despite the family bond and her own internal conflict, it became harder and harder to feel compassion for someone who, in her view, never truly understood the magnitude of what had happened.
He can die today and I would not go to his funeral. I would throw a party instead. Like, I don't care about him.
People who knew Nata Haranaya well said she would have been incredibly proud of her daughter, a young woman who managed to grow up strong, open-minded, and confident despite the tragedy and painful childhood she endured. Even years later, people close to the family said they could still see pieces of Nata in her daughter's personality, the same kindness, sincerity, and inner strength that so many people remembered about her mother. For many, that became a heartbreaking reminder of the life Nata could have continued living if the events of that day had never happened. The youngest of the 3 children is now in the care of her father. After everything this family went through, he ultimately became responsible for raising her and guiding the rest of her life. The details of this case left a deep impression on the people who followed the story from the very beginning. This was the tragic case of Nata Haranaya.
This morning for missing 6-year-old Faye Sweatlick. The last time we heard from investigators yesterday evening, they told us that they are following up on every lead and asking for help from the public to help bring this little girl home safely.
At around 1 in the morning, a surveillance camera picked up a light moving through the woods right next to a residential neighborhood. Someone was out there, in the dark, slowly walking, shining a light on the ground in front of them, like they were searching for something. Less than 7 hours later, that same man walks into Walmart. He spends about 20 minutes in the gardening section, just kind of standing there, not really sure what to choose. Then he ends up buying bags of soil and fertilizer. At 7:47 in the morning, the camera catches him again in that same forest. This time, he's carrying a bag deeper into the trees. About a minute later, he comes back out. But now the bag is gone. Meanwhile, over 250 officers, along with agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation and volunteers, are desperately searching for 6-year-old Faye Sweatlick, who disappeared from her own front yard the afternoon before. No trace, no answers. That same morning, while going through trash bins near one of the houses, investigators find a child's rubber rain boot with polka dots and another item covered in dirt. Less than 30 minutes later, the entire search suddenly shifts direction. In the woods, less than 60 meters from her home, an officer finds a partially buried body. Right next to it, a second small boot. And almost immediately after that, another call comes in from the same neighborhood. In the backyard of a house, they find a man. He's lying in blood, dead. At that moment, police still don't know if these two scenes are connected, but the answer is already closer than anyone realizes. Hey guys, I'm gonna pull you away for just a quick second. I'm actually really curious where my audience is watching from, so I'd love for you to drop your city in the comments and tell me what time it is for you right now. Thanks for sticking with me, I really appreciate it. Go ahead and write that down below, and let's get back to it. Just before 3 in the afternoon, 6-year-old Faye Marie Sweatlick hopped off her school bus near Springdale Elementary School. She met up with her mom, Selena Sweatlick, and the two of them walked the short distance home together, chatting about their day like they always did. Faye was described as this bright, cheerful, super energetic kid. always full of life. Selena used to call her little magical fairy-like, her tiny spark of joy who just wanted to play and have fun all the time. She said Faye loved everyone and everything around her, and she genuinely wanted other people to feel just as happy as she did. And honestly, one thing that really stood out, Selena said her daughter was always the first to give compliments, even to complete strangers. We couldn't go anywhere without her stopping like 3 or 4 people just to give them a compliment, whether it was their hair or the colour of their outfit. And she was always trying to make new friends, all the time. When they got home, Faye had a quick snack and then went outside to play in the yard, something she did all the time. And neighbours later said they saw her out there pretty regularly. Selena kept checking on her, looking outside every few minutes, and at first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. One of the neighbours said they saw Faye running toward the shared fence near Napa Auto Parts sometime between 3:30 and 4 in the afternoon. Around 3:45, Selena stepped outside again to check on her, and that's when she realised her daughter was gone. After running around to the neighbours, making a few calls, and searching the area herself, at 5 in the afternoon, she finally called 911.
Right, and tell me exactly what's happening.
We can't find my daughter. She was playing outside, and now I can't find her.
Okay, how old is she?
She is 6. She's going to be 7 in June.
Alright, I'm going to stay on the line with you, but I'm going to get KCPD on the line too, but I'm going to stay on the line, so don't hang up, okay?
Okay.
Alright, ma'am, you're on the phone with Casey, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Can you tell me what your son's name is? My daughter's name is Faye Sweatlick. Faye.
Hold on. Alright, what was the first name again?
Faye.
Faye, Faye?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what's her last name?
Sweatlick.
Spell that for me.
Sweetlik.
Okay, and what was she wearing?
She was wearing polka dotted rain boots, a flowered skirt,
Okay.
and a black
kind of shirt?
A black T-shirt that has a neon design on it.
And how long has she been gone?
Last I saw her probably about an hour ago.
How tall is she?
She's 3'10".
3 foot? How much does she weigh?
65 pounds.
All right. You last saw her in the front yard. You didn't see which way she went or anything like that?
No, she was just right in front of my front porch.
Within minutes, police arrived at the house, and by 5:30 there were already around 50 responders on scene. Everything was happening really fast, and by 6 in the evening, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had joined the case. The community reacted immediately too. People wanted to help, like right away, but police asked volunteers to hold back and let trained professionals handle the search. Not long after that, Chad Sweatlick, Faye's father, was informed about her disappearance, and FBI agents showed up at his home to conduct a search. But Faye wasn't there, and phone records later confirmed that Chad had been at home at the time his daughter went missing. By then, officers had already started going door to door, asking neighbors if they had any surveillance footage that could help.
Comes to checking on those home security cameras, that's something that we're already doing. Certainly we'll be going, continue to go door to door and then even revisit some of these doors a second time.
Ashley Hunter, a spokesperson for the city of Casey, asked that the community continue to share recordings with law enforcement.
People in the community, in the Churchill Heights community, if you have home security systems, Ring, Wise Video, anything like that, talk with our investigators and let them reach out and obtain some of that video.
The FBI brought in a helicopter, and K-9 units were also deployed. Even with all of that, Public Safety Director Byron Snellgrove said there still wasn't enough evidence to confirm an abduction, and Faye's disappearance didn't meet the criteria for an Amber Alert. By 7 the next morning, a tip line had been set up, and it received nearly 300 calls. Police followed up on every single lead, but none of them went anywhere. At that point, over 250 officers and investigators from agencies across the country had joined the search for Faye. In the Churchill Heights area, checkpoints were set up, and every car going in or out was being stopped and checked. It had been almost 24 hours since Selena called 911. A press conference was held to share new details with the public.
We've all been gathered here for one thing today, and that's to find Faye. The last time Faye was seen, she was wearing a black shirt with the word peace across the front of it. The photos that you have, her hair's a little bit longer than it is today. We're trying to get pictures of that, but it's been cut to about shoulder length or just above. Faye's parents are anxiously awaiting her return. What we would like to ask is that you hold on to a phone number, 803-205-4444. And we specifically asked that the residents of Churchill Heights here in Casey who have cameras such as surveillance cameras around their houses, doorbell cameras, Ring doorbell cameras, anything like that, anything that records, and have any type of recording on their devices between the time of 2 and 5 p.m. yesterday, please call us at that number. Let us know that you have that recording. We'll come get it, look at it, and it may be key in us proceeding with this case. Now again, we're here for one reason. We're here to find Faye.
Authorities still didn't know what exactly had happened, whether Faye had just wandered off and gotten lost, maybe got hurt somewhere, or if she had been taken. But with every passing hour, it became less and less likely that a 6-year-old girl had simply walked away on her own. Investigators released footage from the school bus to show what Faye had been wearing that day, hoping it might lead to new tips. She had on polka dot rain boots and a black t-shirt with the word peace on it. During the intense search, law enforcement methodically interviewed everyone who might have had even the slightest connection to Faye or her circle. That included Selena, her live-in partner Carter, and Faye's father, Chad Swetlick. Every conversation was careful and detailed, with even the smallest details being checked and double-checked. At that point, police were openly saying they weren't ruling anyone out, trying not to narrow the focus too early. One detective even stated directly that there were no clear suspects yet, which honestly just showed how complicated this situation really was. Soon after, following a thorough investigation, Faye's family members were officially cleared as suspects. Searches of their homes, analysis of phone records, and detailed alibi checks left no real reason to doubt their innocence. That decision lifted some of the pressure off the family, but at the same time, it basically pushed the investigation back to square one with no clear direction. On February 12th, police released images of 2 vehicles that had been leaving Faye's neighborhood around the time she was last seen. Those images sparked a new wave of attention and hope for a breakthrough. But pretty quickly, the drivers were identified, and after being checked out, they were also cleared. What first seemed like a promising lead just faded away. Police were back at a dead end. No trace of Faye, no solid evidence, no version of events that clearly pointed forward. The search continued, but with every passing hour, the uncertainty only grew heavier. Thursday morning, February 13th, brought a new, urgent task. It was trash collection day, and officers understood something critical. If there was any evidence in those bins, it could be lost forever. So they had to move fast. A decision was made to carry out one final check of the dumpsters before they were emptied. While searching trash containers near homes on Piccadilly Square, investigators came across something at house number 602, and it seems like it was literally at the last possible moment. The discovery was immediately described as critically important, but details weren't released. The tension rose instantly. It felt like this could be the missing piece they had been looking for. And, whatever they found, it led them right back to the woods. After quickly reviewing the area and narrowing down the search zone, officers moved without hesitation. Less than 30 minutes later, the search for Faye Marie Swetlick came to an end, and it ended in tragedy. Byron Snellgrove was once again scanning the wooded area, carefully looking over the ground when he found her body. It had been hidden in a shallow grave, less than 200 feet from her home, dangerously close, like almost right there next to where she lived. Later, it was determined that she died from asphyxia just a few hours after being taken, and her body had been moved only minutes after that. That detail made everything feel even more brutal and final. Within minutes of finding Faye, officers received another call from Piccadilly Square. In the backyard of one of the homes, they found a man lying on the ground, covered in blood, already dead. At that moment, his identity hadn't been confirmed yet, and police didn't immediately say whether the two scenes were connected. But the tension spiked fast. It felt like all the pieces were starting to come together into something even more disturbing.
Since our last briefing this morning, we've had several developments to share with you. It is with extremely heavy hearts that we are announcing that we have found a body that the coroner has identified as Faye Marie Swetlick. We are now treating this case as a homicide. As this community has been working hard to find Faye and bring her home safely, we wanted you to know as soon as possible. At this time, no arrests have been made. You need to know that this is a fluid investigation and that we are working diligently on it. We also need to inform you that during the course of our investigation, a deceased male was located in the Churchill Heights neighborhood. That investigation has just begun. At this time, we feel there is no danger to the community. We will continue to provide more information as it becomes available. We will not be taking questions. Thank you.
After Faye's body was found, messages of sympathy started pouring in from friends, from strangers, from people who had been following the story from afar, and from those who felt it on a deeply personal level. Flowers, candles, letters. They kept appearing one after another, creating this quiet but powerful space of shared grief. Every word felt sincere, but at the same time, there was this sense of helplessness, like nothing anyone said could really change what had happened. The feeling of loss spread quickly, far beyond just the family. It reached the entire community, into schools, onto the streets, into homes where people once felt completely safe. What had seemed normal just a day before suddenly felt different, more fragile, more unsettling. People spoke more quietly, lingered longer in conversations, like they were trying to process the weight of it all. This loss wasn't something abstract. It was felt in the smallest details, in the empty spaces, in the memories, in the silence that settled in places where there used to be life. And even with all those messages of support, it still felt like no words could fully capture the pain of what was lost.
All I could think of was my own kids, if something were to happen to them.
Oh, I think it was terrible. I feel bad for the family. I feel bad for all the people.
Former Vice President Mike Pence also released an official statement, bringing even more national attention to the case. In his message, he expressed full support for law enforcement, emphasizing just how important their work is in an investigation this complex and emotionally intense. His words came across as a strong vote of confidence in the investigators, who were continuing to work around the clock, trying to piece together exactly what had happened. He pointed out that cases like this don't just require professionalism, they demand real endurance, because every single step can make a critical difference. That statement became yet another sign of how big this case had grown. It had already moved far beyond just one community and captured attention across the entire country. The man who was found on his porch was soon officially identified as 30-year-old Coty Scott Taylor. That identification happened pretty quickly, but it didn't really answer the main questions. If anything, it opened the door to a whole new, even more unsettling phase of the investigation. A name that didn't mean anything to most people at first suddenly became the center of attention. Investigators started digging deep into his life, his habits, his routines, the people he knew, trying to figure out anything that could shed light on his role in all of this. Every detail was checked, every step retraced, but the overall picture still felt incomplete. Who was he, really? What kind of life did he live behind closed doors? And, most importantly, what connection, if any, did he have to Faye? At that point, there were way more questions than answers, and that uncertainty honestly just made everything feel even more tense, like the most important pieces were still missing.
After a little girl disappeared from her yard, investigators are now revealing more details about her death.
Police say that the body of a man found in the same South Carolina neighborhood is connected to the death of 6-year-old Faye Swetlick.
People who knew Coty Scott Taylor described him as withdrawn and distant, someone who rarely opened up to others and almost always seemed to see life through a negative lens. According to them, he would often talk about himself as someone without hope, even referring to himself as asexual and identifying with incel communities. It didn't just sound like self-criticism. It felt like a deep kind of isolation he carried with him all the time. He lived with roommates he also worked with, but even in that environment, he didn't really seem engaged. One of them said Coty would occasionally mention feeling depressed and even brought up suicidal thoughts, but most of the time he kept everything inside, not letting anyone see the full picture of what he was going through. It created this sense that a big part of his inner world was completely hidden. Coty had studied mathematics at the University of South Carolina, but there are no official records showing he graduated, and some reports suggest he left around 2009. That part of his life also feels unfinished. Like there was no clear ending or explanation. Aside from a few traffic violations, he didn't have any serious legal issues. He changed jobs frequently, never really staying in one place for long, but at the time he was working at Wingstop alongside his roommate. His lifestyle seemed unstable, but not something that really drew attention. As soon as Coty's body was discovered, police started putting everything together, carefully connecting details over the next hours and days. Things that once seemed minor suddenly became important. And even though, at first glance, he didn't appear to have any connection to Faye Marie Swetlick, a critical piece of evidence investigators had mentioned was found in a trash container near his home, a detail that completely changed the direction of the case. Investigators believe Coty took Faye right from her yard, but even now it's still unclear exactly how it happened, whether he used force or somehow lured her by gaining her trust. And honestly, that uncertainty is one of the most disturbing parts of the case. It's believed that he suffocated her within just a few hours after the abduction. After that, according to investigators, he somehow managed to keep her body hidden in his apartment for 2 days. And that part is especially shocking, because during that time, investigators searched the apartment twice and didn't find anything suspicious. On February 12th, during the active search in the area, police knocked on the door of Coty's apartment. He wasn't home at the time, so officers spoke with his roommate and searched the place. Inside, they noticed a full bag of dirty laundry. The roommate said it belonged to Coty, and detectives took a DNA sample from it for further analysis. There was also another detail that stood out. On the table there was a flyer about missing Faye Marie Swetlick. At the time, it looked like just a normal part of the ongoing search, but later, it would take on a completely different meaning. After the search, the roommate's alibi was confirmed, and investigators left the apartment without finding anything that directly pointed to a crime. When Coty came back from work later that day, his roommate immediately noticed something was off. He seemed more tense, more nervous, like he was trying to hide something. His behavior just didn't feel natural anymore, and it didn't go unnoticed. Soon after, the roommate also noticed a strong and unusual smell in the apartment. It was sharp, not like any normal household smell, and it made him uncomfortable. At first, he brushed it off as a cheap air freshener, thinking Coty might be trying to cover up the smell of marijuana. But then again, Coty had never used air fresheners before, and that made the whole thing feel even more suspicious. Later that same day, just before 6 in the evening, police returned to the apartment, this time intending to speak with Coty directly, and this time they did. The conversation was short, but important. When asked about his whereabouts, he couldn't provide a solid alibi. His answer was simple. He said he had been home alone, sleeping. But in the context of everything already known, that answer didn't really hold up. Officers left again, without finding anything obviously suspicious. But soon, it would become clear that earlier that same day, a surveillance camera had captured footage that would later become extremely important to the investigation. In that video, officers can be seen searching the wooded area for Faye carefully, step by step, combing through the terrain, not realizing just how close they actually were to the answer. At around 1 in the morning, already February 13th, when everything was completely still and the darkness felt almost total, a surveillance camera in that same wooded area suddenly picked up a light. It appeared out of nowhere, like something out of place in that quiet, nighttime atmosphere. The light moved unevenly, like someone was holding it in their hand and pointing it in different directions, lighting up patches of ground and parts of the trees. And there was something really unsettling about it. It didn't look random or brief. Instead, it felt deliberate, like someone was there on purpose, moving through the area, maybe searching, or doing something they didn't want anyone else to see under the cover of darkness. Someone was moving through the darkness, slow and careful, using a light to guide their way. The beam only cut through small patches of the night, leaving everything else in shadow, and it created this feeling of tension and uncertainty. The figure looked blurry, hard to make out, but the way they moved felt confident, like they knew this area really well. Later, police would confirm that it was Coty Scott Taylor, and that detail gave the footage a completely different, much darker meaning. About 6 hours later, just before 7 in the morning, when the night was slowly giving way to daylight, cameras picked up Coty again. This time, he was walking through the streets, and at first glance, he looked completely normal, but knowing the context, the whole scene feels unsettling. His route was direct and purposeful. He was heading to Walmart on Augusta Road, not stopping, not changing direction. The city was just starting to wake up, and everything looked so ordinary, which only made it more disturbing, considering what had happened just a few hours earlier. He wandered around the gardening section for about 20 minutes, slowly moving from shelf to shelf, like he was trying to find something specific, but at the same time, didn't really know what he was looking for. His behavior stood out. He seemed confused, lingering near items much longer than a typical customer, and a few times he even approached an employee, saying he was supposedly working on a garden but didn't know what exactly he needed to buy. There was this uncertainty in the way he spoke, and it didn't really match someone who actually knew anything about gardening. According to sources, his roommate later insisted that Coty Scott Taylor had no interest in gardening at all, and had never shown any before. On top of that, he told investigators that Coty usually didn't have much money, and lived pretty modestly, but not long before these events, he had received a paycheck. And that detail, later on, started to feel especially important. A Walmart employee later told police that Coty eventually just randomly grabbed a few seed packets off the shelf. His actions looked chaotic, no clear choice, no logic, like he was acting on impulse. From the outside, it almost felt like he was just trying to make it look like a normal purchase. About 10 minutes later, he went to the register and paid for several bags of soil and fertilizer, along with a box of Pop-Tarts, which seems like such a normal thing, but in this context, it only made the mix of random items in his cart feel even stranger. After that, he calmly left the store without drawing any extra attention. After leaving, Coty requested a ride through the Lyft app. According to the driver, from the very first minutes of the ride, Coty made him feel really uncomfortable. There was something tense, but also distant about him. He gave short answers, avoided eye contact, and seemed completely lost in his own thoughts. During the ride, they passed areas where police officers and journalists were already actively searching for Faye Marie Svetlik. The atmosphere on the streets was tense, focused, impossible to ignore. The driver noticed it too, and asked Coty if he knew her, just trying to make conversation or understand what was going on. And Coty responded, "I don't know her. Never seen her before." About 40 minutes later, at 7:47 in the morning, that same surveillance camera, the one that had captured Coty Scott Taylor in the woods earlier that night, recorded movement in that exact same spot again. And the timing, it felt almost too precise to be a coincidence. Police later determined that this time, Coty was carrying one of the bags of soil he had just bought, walking straight into the woods right toward the area where Faye Marie Svetlik's body would later be found. His movements looked deliberate, steady, like he knew exactly where he was going and what he needed to do. He stayed there for about a minute, which honestly is way too short for anything random, but just enough time to finish something planned. Then he walked back out the same way, without the bag. And that detail immediately stood out to investigators. It looked like part of a clear sequence of actions. When police began searching the trash containers near Coty's home, they carefully went through everything, every bag, every item, looking for anything that might matter. And that's where they found a child's polka dot rain boot and a kitchen ladle covered in dirt. Those items stood out instantly. They didn't belong there. They felt out of place, disturbing, like something much bigger was hiding behind them. After that discovery, the decision was made right away. Officers headed back into the woods to conduct another, more focused search, concentrating on the areas that now seemed critical. Surveillance footage later captured the moment when Public Safety Director Byron Snellgrove, while on scene, found Faye's partially buried body. Right next to her was the second small polka dot boot, and in that moment, it confirmed the worst. Around her neck, there was a white plastic trash bag, and that image became the final confirmation of what had happened. Not long after that, Coty Taylor stepped out onto the back porch of his home. What he did next felt sudden, but final. He cut his own throat with a knife, leaving no chance for questioning, no explanation, and that only deepened the sense that so many answers would never come. Beyond the surveillance footage and the evidence found in his trash, there was more, and it was just as critical. During the examination of Faye's body, Coty's DNA was found under her fingernails, a direct sign of physical contact that became key to the investigation. His DNA was under her nails. Her own DNA was also found on the ladle, along with his, and both sets of DNA were recovered from a black laundry bag. All of it came together into one consistent picture, every piece of evidence aligning without contradiction. All available evidence and established facts point to the same conclusion. Coty Taylor abducted and murdered Faye Marie Svetlik and acted alone in this horrific crime, said Byron Snellgrove. According to investigators, there was no indication that anyone else was involved. It was later announced that Faye's funeral expenses would be covered by a funeral home, a gesture of support for the family during an incredibly difficult time. And on February 21st, a public memorial was held, where people came together to say their final goodbyes and honor her memory.
That was Faye Svetlik's favorite song, and it was a somber night for the city of KC as the community said goodbye to the 6-year-old who captured the hearts of so many. Trinity Baptist Church opened its doors to hundreds who came to pay their respects to Faye. And before the service tonight, people lined the streets for this procession from her home in the Churchill Heights neighborhood to the church. This colorful tow truck carried Faye, her mother, and her pink bicycle to the service.
David Bates is the owner of Diligent Towing in Lexington. He's also a neighbor and friend of Faye Svetlik's family. So he reached out to Faye's family and asked how he could help. He offered up his pink tow truck to escort Faye's mother and her ashes to Trinity Baptist Church for her memorial service.
The community's come together 100%. I mean, we're all blessed to be a part of this.
The pink truck towing Faye's bicycle on the back joined dozens of motorcycles and tow trucks for the 2-mile procession to the church. One by one, motorcycles and trucks pulled into the church, greeted by hundreds more, there to show their respect for the little girl who made a big impact during her short time here on Earth.
Faye will be somebody that we remember for the rest of our lives.
Hundreds of people, including first responders and police officers, gathered together to say goodbye. The atmosphere felt heavy, but at the same time, really quiet. Like everyone was trying to hold their emotions in, even though not everyone could. Many showed up wearing pink and purple, Faye Marie Sweatlick's favourite colours. Those colours stood out in the crowd, adding this soft but painful kind of symbolism. As Selena once said, the more sparkle, the better. And on that day, that sparkle wasn't about style. It was about love, about memory. Faye loved receiving letters and writing little notes, simple, genuine, full of that childlike joy. So they set up special journals where people could leave messages, write how they felt, or draw something with colourful pens. One by one, people stepped up, staying a little longer than they planned, carefully writing words or sketches like they were trying to say something that was just too hard to say out loud. Those pages slowly filled up with warmth, with memories, with quiet grief. It took a full year to officially close the case. A long, exhausting process, filled with checks, forensic work, and endless attempts to piece everything together. But even after all that time, there was still this feeling of something unfinished, like something important had slipped away. It's impossible to know exactly what happened that day, or why it happened. Police confirmed that all the available evidence points clearly in one direction, forming a consistent version of events. But even with that, there are still so many questions that will probably never be answered, and honestly, that uncertainty is what makes this story even more unsettling. The motive behind the crime was never established, and most likely, it never will be. Coty Scott Taylor didn't leave a note, didn't leave any kind of explanation at his home, nothing that could help people understand why. Several agencies tried to pull data from his phone, hoping to find at least something that could shed light on the situation, but those efforts didn't lead anywhere. The same with his computer, no meaningful evidence was found. And that just deepened this feeling of emptiness. Like the answers should be there, but they're just not. Even though the Casey Police Department completed its part of the investigation, the case wasn't completely let go. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the State Law Enforcement Division continued their work, keeping certain directions open in case anything new could still come up. It felt like an effort not to fully close the door, even when the main conclusions had already been reached. In July 2021, Public Safety Director Byron Snellgrove, who played a key role in Faye's case and had been there from the very beginning, announced his retirement after more than 35 years in law enforcement. His departure became another quiet but symbolic ending. For someone who had seen many tragedies over the years, but this one, without a doubt, left a mark. For me, after 65 hours of searching, the memory of finding little Faye Marie Sweatlick's body in a shallow grave on the morning of February 13th, 2020, it's something that will never leave me. This tragedy deeply affected the officers who had been involved in the search from the very first moments. They worked without rest, combing through areas, checking every detail, hoping for a different outcome. But even almost a year later, the memories of this case never faded. They stayed with them like this quiet but constant weight that just doesn't let you fully move on. The disappearance and murder of Faye Marie Sweatlick immediately became, and will always remain, deeply personal for each of us. Those words didn't sound like a formality. They felt real, like something coming from people who had seen too much and still couldn't stay unaffected. For them, this wasn't just another case, it was something that hit on a personal level, leaving a mark that doesn't fade with time. Faye's death also had a deep and lasting impact on the community she lived in. People who once felt safe suddenly found themselves dealing with fear, with vulnerability. And that feeling didn't go away after the news cycle ended or after the funeral. It stayed in everyday life, in conversations, in the silence between words, and it still lingers. In memory of Faye, Springdale Elementary School created what they call a buddy bench, a place that became a symbol of support, kindness, and connection. It's not just a bench on a school playground. It's a quiet reminder that even after the darkest moments, people still try to hold on to light, the same kind of light Faye once brought into the world.
If you feel like you don't have a friend to play with, you can sit down on a buddy bench and somebody else will come and sit down with you and talk to you, or somebody will come up to you knowing that you need a friend. And then, kids are awesome that way, and then they can go and play together.
In her farewell speech, Selena Svetlik, holding back her emotions but not hiding the pain, spoke to everyone there with a simple but deeply meaningful request to honor Faye through love. She spoke slowly and clearly, like she wanted every single word to stay with people long after that moment. According to her, love was that invisible force, that real kind of magic that defined Faye Marie Svetlik and made her so special to everyone who knew her. And you could feel it in her voice, not just grief, but this attempt to find meaning in something that shook everyone. She asked people to take just a moment and really think about who Faye was in everyday life, to try and be a little more like her, not as some perfect ideal, but as a real example of kindness and sincerity, to be kinder, even when it's hard, to give compliments to strangers without expecting anything back, to allow yourself those simple joys like dancing in the rain without caring who's watching, stopping in the middle of a busy day just to smell the flowers, and actually noticing the beauty in the small things we usually miss. And more than anything, just give more love, honestly, freely, to everyone you meet. Because as she said, it's in those small, almost invisible actions where something truly lasting lives, even when the words run out and the pain is still there. At 10:45 in the morning on June 29th, 2017, 23-year-old Molly McLaren sent her mother a message with just 2 words: "He's here." She had deliberately switched to a different gym after the breakup because she was certain Joshua Stimson had no connection to it. She blocked him on every platform. She went to the police. She gathered evidence. She warned her friends. Together with her mother, she even asked the neighbors to keep an eye out for him. She did everything a person who's afraid for their life is supposed to do. That morning, Joshua walked into the gym, rolled out a mat right next to hers, and then left. Molly waited a few minutes. She made sure he was gone. Then she texted her mother. "I think everything's okay." She had no idea he hadn't left. He was already waiting for her in the parking lot. Just 2 days earlier, he had signed up for a membership at that very gym. That same day, he bought a kitchen knife. Before that, he had already been stalking her, posting lies about her online, uploading videos he had secretly recorded, and even telling police that the worst was still to come. Even after all of that, the system never stopped him. 58 minutes after Molly's final text, a veteran detective arrived at the parking lot and said that in his entire career, he had never seen anything like what he found inside her car. But to understand how a simple Tinder match turned into a carefully planned murder in just 12 days, we have to go back 1 year. Hey guys, let me grab you for just a second. I'm really curious where my audience is watching from, so I'd love for you to drop a comment and tell me what city you're in and what time it is for you right now. Thanks for taking a moment. Go ahead and share that in the comments, and now let's keep going. That summer, before any of this happened, Molly McLaren was 22 years old. And for the first time, it felt like her life was finally coming together the way she'd always dreamed it would. She had a quality that's a lot harder to fake than most people realize. Whenever she walked into a room, people felt seen, not because she was trying to make an impression, but because she genuinely cared. In the summer of 2016, Molly was 22 and living in Kent, England, slowly building the life she had worked so hard for. From the outside, it looked like she'd already made it through the hardest part that almost no one knew about. Molly was born on May 26, 1994. She was the youngest child in a family held together by the kind of closeness that makes every other hardship a little easier to carry. Her mother, Joanne, who everyone knew as Jo, would later say that having Molly in the house was like having a ray of sunshine. But sunshine doesn't depend on the weather outside. Molly lifted up the people around her even when she wasn't doing well herself. Especially then, she had a close group of friends who had known her for years. They went shopping together, loved getting dressed up, spent weekends at local bars and clubs, and danced until there was no reason left to stay. Molly loved music festivals the way some people love their favorite song, with the kind of excitement you just can't hold back. Every summer, she tried to go to as many festivals as she could. She was always the one dropping festival announcements into the group chat after midnight. She was the one buying tickets before anyone else had even checked the dates. But neither her friends nor her family knew that the person who seemed to have the most energy in any room was spending an incredible amount of strength just trying not to fall apart inside. As a teenager, Molly began suffering from panic attacks. Not the kind people casually talk about, but real ones that hit without warning in the middle of an ordinary day and completely changed the next hour of her life. She also developed an eating disorder, bulimia. That battle lasted for years, and she became incredibly good at hiding it. The kind of skill that only comes with time. She mastered the art of looking completely fine. Her friends had no idea. Her parents didn't know either. She learned how to show the world a version of herself that gave nobody a reason to worry, and she did it remarkably well. The decision to stop hiding everything didn't come with a dramatic moment or some big announcement. Later, she said she had simply grown tired of carrying the burden by herself. She asked for help. She told her family everything, and they didn't turn away from her. If anything, they became even closer. With the support of her loved ones and professional treatment, Molly began working through both her bulimia and her anxiety. It was a real process. Slow. Imperfect. Her parents were grateful, but they also stayed cautious, the way parents do after they've truly feared losing their child. When Molly became passionate about fitness, healthy eating, regular workouts, and running, Douglas and Jo paid close attention. By then, they had learned the difference between someone who was genuinely healing and someone who had simply found a new outlet for the same obsession. They kept their worries to themselves. They asked questions carefully so she would never feel like she was being interrogated. They waited, they watched, and they never admitted just how frightened they still were. But they saw no signs that the illness was returning. Molly no longer restricted herself around food. In fact, she was eating more, not less. She had found a way to stay physically active that made her feel strong, instead of punishing herself. The anxiety never completely disappeared, but she stopped hiding from it. Month after month went by, and little by little, her parents began to relax, because they became more and more convinced that their daughter had truly made it through something that many people never fully recover from. The fear they had silently carried for years slowly began to fade, not because they told themselves to stop worrying, but because Molly gave them every reason to believe she had finally overcome it.
Every day she would have to make conscious decisions to stay on track and not allow this disorder to take over her. She was really good about it. Everyone has bad days, but she was honest. I'm having a bad day. Everyone has a bad day, but this isn't the end.
Molly wanted to show people what recovery really looked like. Not the polished version people post to seem inspiring, but the real one. Every messy, uncomfortable part of it. She started a blog where she wrote about building a healthy relationship with food, what it really means to exercise without turning fitness into another form of self-punishment, and the long, difficult journey toward making peace with a body she had once been at war with. She wrote the same way she spoke, honest, straightforward, never softening the parts that didn't need to be softened. Her blog quickly found an audience, especially among young women who saw themselves in her words and had never before heard someone describe that experience with such honesty. People reached out to tell her that, for the first time, they felt like someone truly understood them. Alongside the blog, she also started sharing workout videos on her social media. They weren't professionally produced, they were just Molly. She worked out, showed the process, and spoke openly about how she was feeling. In one of those videos, she paused in the middle of an exercise, looked straight into the camera, and said words that would later become the most accurate description of her life.
The same bit every day. I feel like I'm lagging. Everyone gets that bit. Just got to push through. It is not pretty.
At 21, Molly enrolled at the University of Kent to study sports science. The campus was close enough to home that she could live with her parents and save money. While studying, she worked several part-time jobs, including waiting tables. Even with all of that, she earned excellent grades. She was training to become a fitness coach. She wanted to turn everything she had learned through her own struggles into something that could help other people. That was exactly who she was. She never liked keeping something to herself if it could make someone else's life better. By the summer of 2016, Molly McLaren was 22 years old. She was studying, working, writing, going to music festivals. And she was surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. Bulimia was behind her. Anxiety was no longer a secret. She had learned how to live with it. Her parents had finally stopped living in constant fear. Her friends were exactly the kind of people you hope to have by your side during your 20s. No matter how she looked at her life, everything seemed to be falling into place. It felt like only one thing was missing. Molly had never been in a long-term romantic relationship. There had been a few dates. Once, she had dated a guy for a few months. But nothing that turned into the kind of relationship she had always wanted. And she didn't take that lightly. She wanted something real. A relationship with a future. She wanted to find someone she could build a life with, not someone to simply spend Saturday nights with. She approached it seriously, just like everything else in her life. With the same honesty people recognized in her blog posts, in her workout videos, and in the conversations she had with friends whenever they needed someone willing to tell them the truth. So she did what a lot of people do when the usual ways of meeting someone aren't working anymore. In July of 2016, she downloaded Tinder. She matched with a few people and exchanged messages, but nothing really clicked. Nobody stood out. Then, about 3 weeks after installing the app, she came across a profile that felt completely different. It belonged to 26-year-old window salesman Joshua Stimson, who lived in the village of Woodham, about 9 miles from where Molly lived. Based on everything she read in his messages, he seemed like someone who understood things she never had to explain. A strong connection developed between them, one that existed entirely through messages for months. Joshua lived nearby, but Molly was busy with school, work, and everything else in her life. They didn't meet in person until November of 2016, 4 months after matching on Tinder. 4 months of texting every single day, talking every day, the kind of constant attention that can make you believe, even before meeting someone, that there's something truly special between you. In reality, it doesn't prove anything. It only means that the person on the other side of the screen has constant access to you and deliberately chooses to keep that connection going. Molly had no reason to see it any differently. She saw a man who was genuinely interested in her, a man who made time for her, someone who showed up on her phone the way people do when they want to become part of your life. And when they finally met face to face, everything seemed to confirm what their conversations had promised. Molly told her friends and family that she thought she had finally found the person she'd been searching for. She had no way of knowing what was hiding behind that mask. because behind it there was already another story. Joshua Stimson worked as a window salesman. The job required exactly the same skills he had used during those 4 months of daily conversations. Quickly figuring people out, showing them the version of himself they wanted to see, and keeping that image alive long enough to turn a first impression into a serious relationship. Former co-workers would later say he immediately stood out from the other applicants. Charismatic, confident, exactly the kind of person employers are excited to hire. But those same co-workers also described the man he became just weeks before the murder. A man who barely spoke to anyone at work anymore, who sat quietly at his desk, looking completely defeated, who could suddenly burst into tears in the middle of the workday, who started missing more and more shifts until he was eventually moved to part-time hours. The man who made an outstanding first impression and the man who slowly unraveled in front of his co-workers were both Joshua Stimson, and Molly never truly saw either one. Before Molly, there had been other women. Not just one, several. Women who had filed complaints about him. Women who all described the same pattern: charm, moving too fast, gradually becoming more controlling, and an absolute inability to accept a breakup. But those complaints were never collected in a system that future police officers could actually see. So when Molly and her mother later sat across from officers in Chatham, the official records showed a completely clean history. That didn't mean Joshua Stimson had no past. It meant the system simply wasn't designed to connect and preserve information like that. It only took a few weeks before the first warning signs appeared. Joshua quickly became increasingly possessive and controlling. He wanted to spend every free minute with Molly. He became angry whenever she spent time with friends. He got upset whenever she wanted to focus on school by herself. He demanded so much control over her time and attention that there was barely any room left in her life for anything else. His moods changed without warning. He presented jealousy as love, control as caring. That's what people do when they've spent a long time learning how to disguise one as the other. Then came the recordings. During one of their first serious arguments, Molly discovered that Joshua had been secretly filming her without her knowledge or permission. He even explained why. According to him, he was collecting recordings so he would have material he could use against her later. She never knew she was being filmed. She never agreed to it. While she believed they were building a future together, he was deliberately creating a private archive of material about her, something he openly referred to as his weapon, to use it against you. That was something he said near the very beginning of their relationship, back when he was still carefully maintaining the image of the perfect boyfriend. He said it while explaining why he had done the very thing she had caught him doing, and he talked about it as if it were completely normal. Even after that, the relationship continued. The secret recordings weren't an isolated incident. They were simply the clearest sign of what had been hiding beneath the surface from the very beginning. Arguments over where Molly was going, who she was spending time with, his expectation that she reply to his messages immediately, his sudden mood swings that everyone around him had to adjust to, and the way every ordinary part of her life, meeting friends, spending an evening studying, or simply wanting to do something without him, always triggered quiet resentment. He rarely said it outright, but it was always there. Constant pressure. For months, that was how Molly lived. She put up with it. She adapted. She kept trying to find the relationship she had believed in when they first matched on Tinder, but that relationship had only ever existed in his messages. Despite all those warning signs, they stayed together through the end of 2016 and entered the new year as a couple. About 4 months later, Molly reached her limit. She could no longer handle the constant need to manage his emotions, the endless arguments, and the way he was slowly separating her from everything that wasn't connected to him. In March of 2017, she ended the relationship. Joshua convinced her to come back. He knew how to be persuasive, just like people who understand exactly which words will have the desired effect. He promised he would change. He offered different explanations for everything. He said the arguments had all been misunderstandings. He claimed the secret recordings had been a misunderstanding too. He insisted his possessive behavior was simply a misguided expression of love, and he told her he finally understood what he had done wrong. He sounded convincing enough that Molly agreed to give him another chance. In May of 2017, they took their first vacation together to Tenerife. Joshua presented the trip as an opportunity to start over. A different country, a different atmosphere, far away from the everyday problems that had been building between them. Maybe, if they changed their surroundings, they could become different people. Molly wanted to believe that. She wasn't someone who gave up easily. She always tried to do everything she could. But once they arrived in Tenerife, she realized the arguments had traveled there with them. Joshua hadn't changed. If anything, everything became even worse. People often think that if the problem is everyday life, work, or constant stress, then changing locations will fix everything. In reality, all it does is remove the distractions. You don't have to go to work. There are no other responsibilities. You spend every hour together. And if the problem isn't the circumstances but the person themselves, changing the scenery changes nothing. It only makes the problem impossible to ignore. In Tenerife, there was nowhere Joshua could go where Molly wasn't. No version of that trip could ever become the fresh start he had promised her, because the problem had never been the circumstances. The problem was him. The constant watching, the way he tried to insert himself into every moment of her personal space. It didn't become less intense, it became even stronger. Every time she reached for her phone, she could feel him watching before she even looked up. She couldn't send a message without knowing he noticed every movement she made, watching, remembering, keeping track. And yet she still sent messages. But now they were completely different. They weren't casual updates. They weren't texts saying she had simply thought about someone. She sent her friends back home just 2 words. "Help me," without an exclamation point, without some dramatic explanation. Just those 2 words. That's how people speak when they can no longer put into words what they're living through. She wasn't complaining about a difficult boyfriend anymore. She was trying to make her friends understand that something had fundamentally changed, and that she needed to get out. She started counting the days until they could go home. On June 16th, 2017, they returned from Tenerife, and for the first time, she felt a clarity she hadn't had before. It wasn't peace. After that trip, there was nothing peaceful left inside her, but she had made up her mind. Enough was enough. She wasn't going to keep waiting for Joshua to become the man he had seemed to be almost 14 months earlier when they had first seen each other on a phone screen. She wasn't going to wake up every morning wondering what kind of day it would be based on his mood. She was going to end the relationship. The only question was how to do it without making things even worse. And from experience, she already knew that even worse was a very real possibility with Joshua. She had already tried to leave once before, back in March. She had already seen the familiar cycle. Apologies, promises, assurances that everything was almost fixed. Once, she had let him convince her to come back. There wouldn't be a second time. No matter what he said. No matter how he tried to explain it away, by July, she had no intention of still being with him. She was going to make herself perfectly clear in front of witnesses, and she wasn't going to respond to whatever came afterward. She knew exactly what usually came next. She believed she was prepared, but no one could have been prepared for what happened over the next 12 days. On the evening of June 17th, Molly went out with her friends. She invited Joshua not because she wanted to be with him, and not because she was giving the relationship one last chance. She wanted other people there when she told him what she needed to say. She wanted witnesses. There was a sense of protection in that. A public place. People she trusted. Before the night was even over, Joshua started an argument. What triggered it doesn't really matter anymore. What matters is what happened next. Molly had finally reached her breaking point. The patience she had spent months giving to his controlling behavior, the secret recordings, and the possessiveness that had been there from the very beginning was gone. Right there, in the bar, in front of her friends, she ended the relationship. The moment Joshua heard those words, he didn't turn back to Molly. He turned to her friends and shouted, "They broke up! She dumped me!" As if they were the ones he had come to plead his case to, as if one of them was supposed to step in to tell him he was the one who had been treated unfairly, or convince Molly she was making a mistake. He started yelling even louder. Then he stormed out of the bar. For a few hours it felt like everything was finally over, but by the very next morning her phone was flooded with messages. First came the apologies, just like before. Long, detailed messages listing every mistake he had made with such precision that they sounded less like genuine remorse and more like someone had taken Molly's own experiences, rewritten them in his own words, and handed them back to her. Molly had seen this before. She had already fallen for it once. She read the messages, and she didn't reply. When his tone changed, when the sweet words ran out and the anger began showing through, just as it always eventually did, she blocked his phone number. Then she went through every one of her accounts and blocked him on every platform she used. That was the moment everything escalated to an entirely different level. Joshua's response to being blocked wasn't to walk away. He didn't accept that the relationship was over. His reaction revealed exactly how he saw the situation. He didn't see a boundary, he saw an obstacle. And the way he chose to get around it said everything about what he was willing to do. He didn't disappear. He started trying to destroy her life. Molly had spent years rebuilding herself. She had overcome the eating disorder that had defined part of her early 20s. She had openly shared her recovery journey. Fitness had become more than a hobby. It had become her purpose. None of that was just social media content. It was visible proof of how far she had come from the darkest period of her life. Her parents had watched her recover. Her friends had walked that journey beside her. The people who followed her online admired the story of a young woman who had fought through unimaginable struggles and come out the other side. Joshua knew all of that. He had sat across from her at dinner while she talked about it. He had listened carefully. Then he began publicly claiming that the only reason Molly stayed thin was because she used cocaine. He made sure her family would see those posts. He tagged her friends. He did everything he could to spread those accusations among the people who knew her and trusted her. It was the kind of accusation that's almost impossible to disprove, because every denial only draws more attention to the lie itself. He wasn't posting those things for Molly. She had already blocked him. He was posting them for everyone else. He wanted to destroy the reputation she had spent years building. And he was doing it from places she could no longer access, through platforms where she couldn't even see what he was saying anymore. Then he uploaded the recordings. The same videos he had secretly filmed without her knowledge. Arguments between them recorded on his phone while she had no idea she was even being filmed. He posted those private moments completely stripped of their context, creating the version of Molly he wanted everyone else to see. Every recording was meant to serve as evidence. Not evidence of anything specific. Just evidence against her. Evidence meant to make people doubt everything she said about him. Molly first learned about the posts from her cousin, who called to tell her what was happening. Because Joshua was blocked, she couldn't see the posts herself. But they kept reaching her through people she knew. He made sure of that. Then he found another way to contact her. He downloaded a different messaging app and started sending threatening messages through a channel she hadn't blocked yet. Every time she closed one door, Joshua opened another. To him, the question was never whether she wanted to communicate. He believed access to her was his right, and that her consent didn't matter. Molly told her friends she was scared. Not that she was annoyed, not that she was upset about his posts. Scared. That was the exact word she used, and that word mattered. By then, she wasn't talking about a difficult breakup anymore. She wasn't complaining about an ex who refused to leave her alone. She had already gone through all of those emotions. Frustration, disbelief, anger. Only one thing remained: fear. And she could explain exactly why she was afraid. She said it plainly. She didn't soften her words. She didn't say, maybe, or I think. She didn't try to make the situation sound less serious so it would be easier for other people to hear. She simply said she was afraid. She told people she believed Joshua was capable of physically hurting her, and the people who heard her believed her, because they could see what was happening with their own eyes, and they became afraid for her too. When one of her friends asked her directly whether she thought Joshua might actually attack her, she answered, yes, without hesitation, not as a guess, not as someone trying to convince herself it would never happen, just yes. Together, she and her mother spread everything out across the kitchen table, every screenshot, every threatening message, every post. They organized it all, printed everything out, put it into a folder. Then, they drove to the police station. It was June 22nd, 2017.
The verdict has brought us a small measure of comfort, but it seems that nothing will take away the pain or allow us to come to terms with our Molly being taken from us. We are serving a lifetime of pain, anguish, and loss. Thank you.
The officers ran a background check on Joshua. They found nothing. No previous reports, no history, no warning flags anywhere in the system. Officially, he had a completely clean record. They told Molly that without any previously documented incidents, there was very little they could do. Even so, they agreed to call him. They put the conversation on speaker so Molly and her mother could listen. Joshua insisted he hadn't done anything wrong. Then he added, "If you think things are bad now, just wait and see what's coming next." He said it to the police. During the call, knowing Molly was listening, inside a building full of officers, he spoke with the confidence of someone who expected no consequences for what he was saying. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a calm, deliberate statement. Through the police, he delivered a message to the woman who was afraid of him, telling her that everything he had done so far was only the beginning. The police never logged the call. No incident number was created. No case was opened. Nothing was entered into any system that might have alerted a future officer that this had already happened if Molly came back for help, or if something worse occurred. Molly and her mother walked out of the police station with nothing, and even more frightened than they had been when they walked in. Imagine sitting in that room and hearing those words. You gathered every piece of evidence. You went to the police. You explained everything that was happening, and in return you heard, "He has a clean record. There's nothing we can do." Then, while you're still sitting in that same office, they put the person you're afraid of on speakerphone, and, knowing you're listening, he calmly tells you, "This is nowhere near the worst of what's coming next." He never hesitated. Not inside a police station, not in front of police officers, not while the woman he was stalking sat just a few feet away from the phone. Then the call ended. The officer hung up, and no one wrote anything down. You walked out of that building carrying the same folder of documents you had brought in. Except now, you were even more afraid. The only difference between June 21st and June 22nd was this. Now he knew you had gone to the police, and it hadn't stopped him. That was what Molly and her mother went home with after leaving the police station on June 22nd. 2 days later, Joshua walked into the police station himself. He claimed Molly was damaging his reputation, and he filed an official complaint. That complaint was recorded. An official report was created. His name appeared in the system. His complaint was documented, entered into the database, and could be found during any future search. His paperwork existed. Hers didn't. Not long afterward, Molly went back to the police. Joshua's posts were still online. This time, her report was officially logged. Later, she was told that Joshua had agreed to remove the content. But legally, the officers said there was still nothing more they could do. So Molly and her mother printed out photographs of Joshua. They went door to door through the neighborhood. They knocked on people's doors. They explained what was happening. They asked neighbors to watch for him and to call if they saw him anywhere near their house. 2 women carrying printed photographs were forced to build their own neighborhood watch because the official system had already sent them home twice without real help. Think about what it takes to print a photograph of the person you're afraid of. You walk up to the door of a neighbor you barely know. You calmly explain, clearly enough that they'll understand and gently enough that they'll believe you, that your daughter's ex-boyfriend has been threatening her, and you ask them to keep an eye out if they see him. Then you repeat the same conversation at every house in the neighborhood. You do it because the police station exists. You've already been there twice, and twice you've walked out with nothing. So this walk, this neighborhood, these printed photographs, they are the only tool you have left that might make any difference. This wasn't their failure. This is what happens when every official avenue has been exhausted and the fear never goes away. Every step Molly took during those weeks was the right one. She saved the evidence. She went to the police. She completely cut off all contact. She told the people around her exactly what she was afraid of. She did everything she was supposed to do. And still, none of it created the official record that should have followed Joshua, because the phone call in which he directly promised that things would get worse was never officially documented. And there was a reason Joshua appeared completely clean in the police system. Before Molly, there had been other women, other reports of his stalking, other documented accounts, and none of them had led anywhere. That was why, when Molly and her mother sat across from those officers, the man they were describing looked, on paper, like someone with no history at all. Just a man who had argued with his ex-girlfriend. The gap between reality and what was recorded in the system wasn't some minor detail. It was a direct link between an institutional failure and everything that happened afterward. Life couldn't simply stop. Molly enrolled in courses to become a certified personal trainer. She was rebuilding her future. Her close friend had just been promoted. On June 20th, she applied for a receptionist position at the Nuffield Gym in Medway Valley Park, Rochester. Not the gym where she and Joshua had worked out together. A different one, in a different area, somewhere he had no connection to. It was a deliberate decision. She was trying to move part of her everyday life to a place where Joshua had never been and had no reason to appear, but she didn't know what she couldn't see. Sometime between June 17th and June 27th, Joshua arranged for someone else to follow Molly's social media accounts on his behalf. It was a fake account, created for one purpose: to monitor her movements through a channel she never realized needed to be blocked. As far as she knew, Joshua had been blocked everywhere. Molly believed she had completely cut off his access. She had done everything right, but information was still reaching him. On June 27th, Joshua Stimson went to the Nuffield Gym in Medway Valley Park and bought a membership. Later that same day, surveillance cameras at an Asda supermarket in Chatham captured him buying a Sabatier kitchen knife. Then, at another hardware store in Chatham, he bought a Saxon pickaxe. Both purchases were made on the same day, during the same trip. He took everything home. After the crime, when police searched his bedroom, they found the empty packaging from the Sabatier knife on the floor. Stop for a moment and think about that sequence. On the very same day he bought a membership to the gym Molly had deliberately chosen because it had no connection to him, he also bought a knife and a pickaxe during a single shopping trip. Then he took them home. When police searched his car on June 29th, they found both of those items inside, along with a Stanley knife. Investigators reviewed the hardware store surveillance footage only after the murder. That was when the significance of those purchases, combined with the gym membership, became unmistakably clear. But on June 27th, Molly knew none of it. She didn't know he had joined her gym. She didn't know about the pickaxe. She didn't know that on the very day he gained access to the one place she believed was safe from him, he also bought what he intended to bring there. The breakup happened on June 17th. The threat during the speakerphone call came on June 22nd. His counter-complaint to the police, was filed on June 24th. The gym membership and the weapon purchases happened on June 27th. Just 12 days from the breakup at the bar to the trip to the hardware store. If, looking back now, you can find even a single moment during those 12 days when this tragedy still could have been stopped, the stalking, the publication of the secret recordings, the direct threat made to a police officer, the counter-complaint, the photographs a mother and daughter carried door to door through their neighborhood, the fake account tracking her life, the gym membership the pickaxe bought that very same day. This no longer looks like a situation that gradually spiraled out of control. It looks like a sequence of actions taken by someone who had already made his decision and was simply carrying out his plan, one step at a time. Molly's close friend had just received a promotion. On the evening of June 28th, Molly and her friends planned to celebrate at the Ship and Trades pub in Chatham. They simply wanted one evening for themselves, away from the nightmare that had followed them for weeks. Earlier that day, Molly posted an Instagram story. She named the pub. She wrote that they would be there that evening. She had blocked Joshua on every one of her accounts, and she was completely certain he could no longer see anything she posted. It was a perfectly reasonable assumption. She had done everything she was supposed to do. The only thing she didn't know was that Joshua had already found a way around it. She was dancing with her friends when he walked inside. He wasn't alone. He came with another woman, and he made sure Molly would notice him. She saw him. She listened to what she felt, and realized she wasn't jealous at all. Whatever feelings she had once had for him were completely gone. Only one thing remained, cold, clear, and painfully familiar: fear. Joshua walked past her table several times with the woman he was with, back and forth, again and again. He was deliberately turning it into a performance. He wanted her to watch. He wanted a reaction. Molly moved her belongings to another part of the pub. She kept her phone in her hand, and she texted her mother. She told her Joshua had shown up too, and that she had no idea how he had found out where she was. Then she saw him leave through the front entrance. He walked out of the pub, and he never came back. Molly kept looking at the door for a little while longer, and she felt something inside her change. Her friends immediately told her to go home. Her mother said the same thing. She picked up her bag, and for the first time in a long time, she felt relief. Small, but real. That particular feeling when you think, he's gone. I can leave now. This night is finally over. She had no idea what Joshua did after he walked out of the pub. He went to the parking lot, but he didn't leave. He returned to his car, parked it where he could see the exit, and waited. He sat there long enough for the relief Molly felt inside the pub to turn into certainty. She was only 23 years old. She had spent weeks living in constant fear. She deserved at least 2 minutes of feeling safe. The next morning, June 29th, Molly woke up early and went to work out at the Nuffield gym. That morning, she didn't post her location anywhere. For Joshua, it was the first day off after switching to a reduced work schedule. At 10:45 that morning, Molly was working out at the very gym she had deliberately chosen because it had no connection to Joshua. She looked up and saw him walking inside. That morning, the gym was almost empty. Just the two of them. She watched as he rolled out a workout mat right beside her and started exercising. Then, she looked at him and asked directly, "Are you stalking me now?" He answered, "I don't think that's any of your business." She took out her phone and texted her mother, "Mom?" He came to the gym and set up right next to me. Then she called her. Her mother told her to leave immediately and go home. She also sent a message to her friends in WhatsApp. "I feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder." Suddenly, Joshua stood up abruptly and walked out of the workout area. Security cameras captured what happened next. He walked toward the entrance as if he was about to come back inside. He stopped by the doors. Then, he turned around and left the building completely. But he didn't go to his car. He walked into the parking lot and waited, as if he knew Molly was already gathering her things, and wanted to be outside before she was. Molly stayed inside for a few more minutes. She saw him leave. She checked. She waited what anyone would consider a reasonable amount of time. She did exactly what anyone would have done after seeing an unwanted acquaintance leave the building. She waited long enough to believe it was finally safe. Only then did she walk outside. She headed across the parking lot toward her Citroën, which was parked nearby. Before she could even reach the driver's door, Joshua pulled up behind her in his car. He tried to get her attention. Molly ignored him. She got into the driver's seat. But she didn't have time to close the door and lock it. He was already there. He yanked the door open. Molly started screaming. A man named Benjamin Morton, who was walking his dog nearby, saw what was happening and ran toward the car. Another witness, Cody Jarvis, also saw the attack unfold in the parking lot and immediately called the police. Morton tried to grab Stimson and pull him away from Molly. He even tried to trap his leg in the car door to stop the attack. He managed to grab hold of his leg, but it slipped free. By then, Molly was already covered in blood. He couldn't stop what was happening. Later, Morton told the court the man kept stabbing the woman in the neck and head, mostly in the neck. It was like a complete frenzy. The Sabatier kitchen knife, which had been purchased at Asda 2 days earlier, was later found on the driver's seat of her car. At some point, Stimson stopped the attack. He got out of the vehicle, then began pacing back and forth across the parking lot. When the police arrived, Joshua Stimson walked up to the officers on his own. He was completely covered in Molly's blood, and said only 2 words, "Are you here for me?" He didn't run. He didn't hide. He stopped the attack, got out of the car, and waited for the police in the parking lot. And when the officers arrived, he identified himself. The calmness, the way he paced across the parking lot, the way he waited, those 2 words, every bit of it was entirely consistent with everything he had done over the previous 12 days. It was the same pattern as buying a knife and a pickaxe on the same day, the same pattern as purchasing a membership at the gym Molly had specifically chosen to get away from him, the same pattern as calmly threatening a police officer over speakerphone when he said, without raising his voice, that the worst was still to come. Throughout those 12 days, there wasn't a single moment that suggested he had lost control of himself. Not one. Every step he took pointed to someone who had already made up his mind. Someone who had a plan, and was simply carrying it out. Despite the immediate response of police officers, paramedics, and a doctor who arrived at the scene and fought to save her life, Molly McLaren was officially pronounced dead at 11:43 that morning.
Most Honourable Chancellor, it is with great sadness that I now invite Doug and Joanne McLaren to accept the award of undergraduate diploma in sports and exercise for health, awarded posthumously to Molly McLaren.
She was only 23 years old. After her death, investigators began taking a much closer look at everything that had already been known, but had never received the attention it deserved. Police obtained surveillance footage from Asda and Homebase from June 27th. The videos showed Joshua buying a Sabatier knife, then, later that same day, buying a Saxon pickaxe. The very same day he signed up for a gym membership, detectives also recovered the messages Molly had sent on the morning of the attack. They went through her WhatsApp conversations, the messages she had sent to her mother, every record she had created over those 12 days as she tried to document everything that was happening to her. A weapon was found inside his car. Investigators also found a Stanley knife. And in his bedroom, they discovered the packaging from another knife. There was more physical evidence as well. Piece by piece, it all came together into one clear and undeniable picture. The same picture that had never become clear when Molly needed help the most. Joshua Stimson was charged with murder. At trial, the defense argued that he was guilty not of murder, but of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. They claimed he suffered from bipolar disorder. Joshua himself did not testify. Two psychiatrists took the stand and presented completely opposing opinions. The defense expert, Dr. Shahed Majid, testified that Joshua had a pathological mental condition that significantly impaired his ability to function normally. The prosecution's psychiatrist, Dr. Philip Joseph, testified that he did not believe Stimson suffered from any officially recognized mental disorder. He also said there were serious reasons to question the claim that Joshua had bipolar disorder. Led by Philip Bennett KC, formerly QC, the prosecution carefully walked the jury through the entire timeline. The match on Tinder, the relationship, the secret recordings, the social media posts about cocaine, the phone call police overheard, the counter-allegation Joshua filed 2 days later, the purchase of the weapons on June 27th, the gym membership he signed up for that very same day, the fake account he used to keep tracking Molly's movements while she believed she had blocked him everywhere. From the very beginning, the prosecution rejected the defense's claim of diminished responsibility. The person standing before the jury was not someone who had suddenly lost control. He was someone who had planned everything. The jury also heard from eyewitnesses. Benjamin Morton described in detail everything he had seen. Cody Jarvis testified that he watched Stimson pull into the parking lot, violently throw open his car door, and then heard Molly screaming. He said her screams could be heard from the other side of the parking lot. Two of Joshua's former girlfriends also testified. Both told the jury that after their relationships ended, he stalked them too. This was not new behavior, and it was not the first time he had treated a woman this way. It was a pattern that had developed over many years, one that had been reported before. But none of those earlier incidents had ever resulted in an official record that an officer could have seen when Molly walked into the police station with her folder of evidence on June 22nd. One of Joshua's former girlfriends told the court that he had sent her photographs of herself sunbathing in her own backyard. The pictures had been taken without her knowledge, from outside her home, from a place she never even knew existed. He also threatened to drown her. Joshua's former co-workers were called to testify as well. They described him as if they were talking about two completely different people. The first was the man who made an outstanding first impression when he was hired. Charismatic, friendly, someone everyone wanted on their team. The second was the man they watched in the weeks leading up to the murder. He had almost stopped talking to people. He seemed deeply depressed. At times, he would suddenly burst into tears for no apparent reason. He started showing up to work less and less, until he was eventually moved to part-time hours. Two sides of the same person. One had always been an act. The other was something that had been building inside him for years, while no official agency even knew his name. After Joshua Stimson was arrested, he was interviewed by a mental health nurse. She asked him whether he had ever thought about harming Molly. He replied, "Maybe yesterday, but I didn't act on them." When he was asked whether he had been struggling with his thoughts, he said, "I guess I was. Otherwise I wouldn't have done it." The case also revealed the involvement of one of Joshua's acquaintances. She knew what had been going on. When Joshua found out that Molly had blocked him on Facebook, he told her about it. She replied, "Don't worry. If we need to, we can keep an eye on her through my account." People around him knew. They saw what he was doing, and some of them even offered to help. The jury, made up of 8 men and 4 women, deliberated for less than 4 hours. Then they returned with a unanimous verdict. Guilty of murder, less than 4 hours, 12 days of preparation, 12 months of a relationship, reports made to the police, counter-allegations, a surveillance network built with printed photographs and fake social media accounts. The jury heard every bit of it. And in less than 4 hours, they reached the only conclusion the evidence supported. Joshua Stimson never denied killing Molly. His only defense was that he supposedly wasn't in control of himself. That a mental condition had taken away his ability to understand what he was doing. The jury decided that simply wasn't true. Buying a knife at Asda, buying a pickaxe at home base, signing up for a gym membership, tracking Molly through a fake account, choosing to wait for the very woman who had just texted her mother that it finally seemed safe to go outside. None of that looks like the actions of someone who had lost control. It looks like the actions of someone who had already made up his mind, someone who simply carried out his plan, one step at a time. When the sentence was announced, shouts erupted from the courtroom. Yes, Molly's mother Jo and her friends, who had attended every single day of the trial, broke down in tears. Many of them were the very people Molly had been calling and texting throughout those 12 days. They were the ones she told she was afraid. They were the ones who watched her do absolutely everything right. And still, they couldn't make the system see what they had seen all along. Joshua Stimson showed no emotion. He stared straight ahead. That's how he sat through the entire trial. He never testified. Not once did he look toward the seats where Molly's mother and friends sat every day. He silently listened as Benjamin Morton described what he had witnessed in the parking lot. The brutal attack. The blood covering his hands. The car door he had tried to shut. The woman he couldn't save. And he showed no reaction whatsoever. He listened the same way as the women who had known him before Molly testified. Women who came into that courtroom and described what he had done to them and what they had feared he might do next. Still, he kept staring straight ahead. Whatever it was inside him that had driven those 12 days of increasingly dangerous, methodical, and carefully planned actions also seemed to allow him to remain completely unmoved, completely emotionless. As if everything happening around him had nothing to do with him at all. The sentence was handed down in February of 2018 at Maidstone Crown Court. Before imposing the sentence, Judge Adele Williams addressed Joshua Stimson directly. It was a brutal, carefully planned, and cowardly act. It was an act of pure evil. You deliberately took Molly's life, doing so in the cruelest way possible. You were driven by revenge. Judge Williams concluded that while Stimson displayed narcissistic personality traits, he did not suffer from a personality disorder, and the psychiatric evidence did not support any diagnosis that could reduce his criminal responsibility. She said he was an exceptionally selfish and ruthless man. He planned the murder. Then he carried it out, in broad daylight, in a public parking lot, surrounded by other people, and he showed not a single trace of remorse. She was only 23 years old. She was a beautiful, intelligent young woman, Judge Williams continued. She was in her second year at the University of Kent. She had her whole life ahead of her. She was a loving and deeply loved daughter, a cherished member of her family, and a dear friend to so many people. She is mourned by an enormous number of people. The pain and suffering of her family are impossible to ignore. Their loss is immeasurable, and nothing I can say, nor any sentence I impose today, can ever take that pain away. She then turned directly to Joshua. You have shown no remorse whatsoever for the murder of Molly. The only person you care about is yourself and your own feelings. The starting point for the minimum sentence was 25 years, because this was a deliberate, premeditated murder committed with a weapon he had intentionally brought to the scene. But the aggravating factors, most notably his weeks-long campaign of stalking Molly before the murder, increased the minimum term to 26 years. The judge then said to him, "You will not even be eligible to be considered for parole until you have served at least 26 years in prison, and it is entirely possible that you will never be released. You may remain in prison well beyond that minimum term. Whether you are ever released will be decided by the parole board." Joshua Stimson stared straight ahead, without the slightest reaction. He didn't react to anything. Not the verdict, not the testimony, not the parking lot surveillance footage, not even the judge's words that he might never walk free again. He had worn that same expression when Molly told him in the bar that it was over. The same expression when police ordered him to stop stalking her. The same expression when officers repeatedly asked over the loudspeaker whether he understood what they were saying. It was as if none of those words had anything to do with him. After the sentence was handed down, Molly's family released a statement. The last 6 months have been a nightmare beyond words. We never could have survived this without the love and support of our family and friends. The number of friends Molly had has truly overwhelmed us. We have never seen anything like it. Every single person who stood by us and shared in our grief helped us through the darkest time of our lives. They also said that from that moment on, they wanted to do everything they could to ensure Molly's legacy lived on, through the cause she had dedicated herself to, through the countless people she never stopped helping. After the trial, Detective Sergeant Ally Wharton addressed the media. She described Molly as a popular, ambitious young woman who had her whole life ahead of her. She said that Stimson had taken that life in the most brutal way imaginable. She also expressed her gratitude to everyone who tried to stop the attack, especially Benjamin Morton, the man who rushed toward an armed attacker with a knife, who tried to pull him away from Molly, and who carried the memory of what he had witnessed for years before, recounting it in court with such vivid detail that no one in the courtroom would ever forget his words. She also thanked the police officers and paramedics who responded to the scene and fought to save Molly's life, but were unable to save her. She said that day would remain with them forever.
Sick, food, drink, people getting together. At Molly's wake, it was so lovely having all family and friends together, and a few of her friends said, wouldn't it be lovely to do this once a year? And that's where we got the idea from. Let's have a Molly Fest, because Molly loved festivals.
We formed the foundation after Molly died. Molly had suffered with bulimia, but she'd largely overcome it. And she showed us and she showed other people that you can beat it.
After the verdict, her parents didn't stop. They took everything Molly had devoted herself to during her life and built something even greater. The Molly McLaren Foundation helps people struggling with eating disorders, the very battle Molly had once overcome herself, and later spoke about openly with strangers through her blog. She wrote in her own voice, without pretending, because she understood that people didn't need a polished recovery story. They needed a real one. Since its founding, the foundation has raised around £100,000 and has helped more than 30 people receive 30 weeks of specialized psychological treatment, the kind of long-term, professional, high-quality support that most people simply cannot afford without financial assistance. These are people who otherwise would never have had access to the level of care that once saved Molly's life. The foundation took everything she created, her blog, her videos, and her honesty about what recovery truly looks like, and turned it into something lasting, into funding, into support that now reaches far more people than Molly ever could have helped on her own. Every year, on May 26th, the day she was born, people gather for Molly Fest, a music festival. Friends who knew Molly come together alongside people who never had the chance to meet her. It is not a day of mourning. It is a conscious refusal to let the final image of Molly forever be that parking lot in Chatham on that June morning. Every summer, she tried to attend as many music festivals as she could. She was always the first to buy tickets, long before anyone else had even checked the dates. A festival on her birthday is more than a memorial. It is exactly the kind of day she would have loved. Her case also changed the law. After Molly's death, police forces across the United Kingdom were required to officially record every report of stalking, without exception. Every report now creates a permanent official record. It cannot be erased, and it cannot be overlooked by the next officer who searches that person's name. If the reports made by the women who came forward about Joshua before Molly had been entered into that system, the officer who heard Joshua tell a woman over the police loudspeaker, while she sat only a few feet from the phone, that the worst is yet to come, would have searched his name. And he would have seen the pattern. He would have realized that the report made on June 22nd was not the first. He would have seen the history. And that history would have demanded a very different response. He would not have allowed Molly and her mother to leave the police station carrying the same folder they had brought in. Molly's name now lives on in that policy, even if it is never written into it. These changes were not just a formality, they changed the system itself. Mandatory recording of every stalking report now means that the third officer to receive a complaint about someone sees exactly what the first and second officers saw. It means the system can finally recognize a pattern instead of leaving victims to piece the story together on their own. It means that when a woman walks into a police station and reports a man who is threatening her, the officer no longer sees an empty history. He sees the previous reports. He sees the past. And that means the same clean record Joshua Stimson hid behind during those 12 days, a record created not because his behavior didn't exist, but because there were no officially recorded reports documenting, it can no longer exist the way it did then. The policy is named for what it is meant to protect against. It exists because, once, it failed to protect Molly McLaren. Every report officially recorded under that policy, every pattern it now makes visible, every officer who searches a name and sees a history that changes what they do next. That is what happened after Molly.
It's just bad memories, and the more you think about it, the more you hate it.
She would want us to try and be happy together for the rest of our lives, but we're finding that really tough. The only time I go out is now. I will go to the supermarket once a week or once every 2 weeks. People have said, let's go for a walk around the village. I can't do that. I find it hard to, I suppose, go to places that I went with Molly, because although I love the memories, I don't need to physically go there to have the memories. If man or woman goes to the police frightened about someone, even though that person might not be arrested, but there should be a notes, there should be a database with their name on it. Had there been one then with his name on it for things he did up in Staffordshire, then when Molly went to the police, they would have seen his name.
The perpetrators seem to get a better deal.
He's going to be looked after for all the time he's in there. They're going to make sure he's safe. We're not all right. Who's looking after us? I feel I always need to know what prison he's in, but we're not allowed to know. And it just seems to be he always gets the better deal.
Do you think about him day to day?
I try not to, but he creeps into my thoughts. Especially because of the effect he's having on Doug and I now. I don't want to give him the pleasure, and I'm determined he's not going to get the better of us.
A person can tell the police exactly what they intend to do to you, and those words can still end up never being officially recorded. The only thing that creates an official record is someone actually entering it into the system. The only thing that changes what the next officer sees when they search a person's name is that, at some point, someone entered that information into the database. Molly McLaren did everything she was asked to do. She reported the stalking. She collected evidence. She walked into the police station with her mother carrying a folder full of proof. And she sat in that office while the man threatening her made even more threats over the loudspeaker to the officers who were supposed to protect her. Yet, none of it became an official case. None of it followed him in the system. If it had. If just one officer, on one day in June 2017, had simply recorded the incident and created a record that remained in the database. The next background check might have found it, and what happened afterward might have unfolded differently. Perhaps that information would have reached someone with the authority to change what came next, but it never did. There is one detail in the sentence that is not talked about nearly enough. The judge said the starting point for the minimum term was 25 years because of the category of the offence, a deliberate murder committed with a weapon brought to the scene in advance. She then considered the aggravating factors. And she added one more year. The only aggravating factor she specifically identified was the 12-day campaign of stalking that led up to the murder. Not the cocaine posts, not the release of private videos, not the threat made over the police loudspeaker, not the retaliatory complaint intended to portray the victim as the offender, the stalking itself. 1 additional year. For 12 days of documented behavior that had been reported to police, witnessed by multiple officers, and yet never left an official record. A minimum of 26 years, and he may never be released. That sentence reflected the full picture. The entire system Joshua built around Molly during those 12 days, the systematic destruction of her reputation, the manipulation of the very system she turned to for protection, the deliberate purchase of weapons, waiting in the parking lot until, inside the bar, she finally believed she was safe. A minimum of 26 years, and he may never walk free again. That gap was never the story of one officer, or one isolated mistake. It was a failure in a system that had already let other women down long before Molly, and no one had even realized it. Molly paid for that failure with her life.